We're really glad to have you all here. This is the first of 3 meetings. All 3 of the meetings will be exactly the same. So we'll have other people joining us at other times to learn about this process. And I'm going to throw it over to Scott, who's going to start with all of our presentation.
Excellent. Let me go ahead and share the presentation, or at least the screen, and then get started there. All right. Hopefully, is it displaying the actual proper side? Perfect. Okay. So again, want to thank everybody for coming out to hear about the 2022 Neighborhood Improvement Grant Program. We are the Community Engagement Coordinators with the City of Aurora. We are housed in the Housing and Community Service Department for anybody interested. So here's kind of just a brief rundown of tonight's agenda. We've already kind of checked off welcoming everybody. So next we'll kind of go through some program information. We'll talk about some things to keep in mind while you're putting your application together and kind of considering your project. We'll talk about some really great project ideas that we've seen over the years and some cool stuff we'd like to see happen in the future. We'll talk a little bit about kind of application review, some city resources, and of course we'll have time for questions. But certainly if you have kind of questions along the way, feel free to go ahead and put them in chat. We'll make sure that we get those answered one way or another. And of course, we'll have all of our contact information on display here tonight. So if you do kind of think of something later, you'll be able to reach out to us and we'll be able to talk through it. So with that, we'll kind of go ahead and get started with the kind of overview that includes the goals, the funding, the timeline, and kind of the award criteria. So the goals of the program should look fairly familiar. Essentially, we're looking to improve the physical condition of neighborhoods. We want to enhance neighborhood pride and identity. Definitely looking to increase that communication and community building amongst neighbors. And we want to encourage placemaking by bringing assets into the neighborhood that are going to encourage gathering and positive experiences for the community. The funding this year, we've got $60,000 for this overall opportunity. Maximum per project is going to be $5,000. You're also able, though, to supplement that with your own funds or apply for other grants to compete, or rather to complete larger projects if necessary. Here is a timeline, and I do want to just let you all know we will make this presentation, the slides, we can make that available. We've also got a guidebook and a couple other documents now posted on our website that we put up there today that we think are very helpful. So we definitely recommend you check those out because, again, this timeline will be there for you to reference back to. But basically, you've attended a neighborhood improvement grant information meeting, so you've got that first mark kind of checked off there. Next, on or before March 25th of this year, you're going to want to meet with your, actually should say neighborhood, your community engagement coordinator. We didn't update that. Because you're going to want to discuss your grant project and get kind of referral contacts. And those referral contacts we'll get into a little bit more later, but essentially those are going to be other staff members that are subject matter experts in their field that are going to be able to tell you what you're going to need to do to make your project happen. So in March and April, you're going to have that time to discuss your project with those departmental referrals. Then April 22nd at 5 p.m., that is going to be the deadline to submit your application. The applications this year are going to be digital, so it's a little bit of a change. We'll have the link in this presentation as well as on our website for those interested in looking at the application. So then in late April and early May, the selection committee is going to meet and review the applications to determine which will be funded. So they're going to score those, and we'll get into that. Mid-May then, all of the groups are going to be notified via their primary project coordinator by either email or mail how their application turned out. And then successful applicants will be required to meet again with their coordinator to kind of sign agreements based on whatever the awards happen to be. And then from May to October, all of the awardees are going to, with the approved funding, are going to work with their coordinator to proceed through the related city processes and ensure that all the funds get spent and the project happens. And then finally, October 31st, all projects have to be completed, as well as all of the documentation needs to be back to staff to ensure we can process everything in time for the end of the year.
Really quickly, I just wanted to go over, most of you might have known us as neighborhood liaisons for the last 30 some years. We just had a name change 2 weeks ago, so please go with us as we adjust to our new title. So when we're saying coordinators, we're still the same position. that you've always engaged with as neighborhood liaisons, but our new title is Neighborhood Engagement Coordinators, and we will update the presentation. I don't know how that slipped by us, but just wanted to, if it seems like we're calling ourselves different things, that's why. So we just wanted to give a little context.
Perfect. Thank you, Meg. Yeah, great point. So how are the grants going to be selected? So a staff committee is going to review and score each of the applications, and the top scoring applications from across the city are going to be funded. And there you can see our point value kind of breakdown and the award criteria. The one thing for those that may have participated or applied for our beautification grant in years past, the one thing that I really want to point out here and stress that is different from previous those previous iterations are that you are now going to be in competition with everybody across the city. So prior to this, it was Ward 1 competed with Ward 1, 2 with 2, etc. Now you're competing across the city. So just something to keep in mind as you fill out your application. So to get into a little bit of kind of that criteria and a bit of a breakdown. So the community impact aspect, the top scoring application is going to clearly demonstrate the positive impact that the project's going to have on the neighborhood or community as a whole. And it will show how the project specifically implements those goals that we had previously mentioned of the program. The sweat equity, neighborhood match, and community participation, those are going to be huge. So to receive a top score there, applications are going to have to maximize the use of community participation, sweat equity, and neighborhood or other funding matches. The best applications are going to provide volunteer lists or commitments from the community and documentation related to other funding sources or commitments. In addition, these applications can show how these components factor into the overall project budget. For budgetary purposes, general volunteer assistance or sweat equity is going to be calculated at $25 an hour for our program. Then the third point, so connecting neighbors and fostering a strong sense of community. A top scoring application here is going to explain how the project fosters strong, lasting social connections between neighbors. And the highest scoring applications or projects are going to provide ongoing engagement opportunities between neighbors and can clearly show sustainability towards that end in particular. Finally, the last 2 points. So showing broad community support, the highest scoring applications are readily show full support from any community stakeholders that may be impacted by or have a vested interest in the project or project area. That could include neighbors, businesses, HOAs, neighborhood groups, or other government entities, thinking stuff like Excel as well. So these applications will include letters, petitions, meeting minutes, volunteer commitments, etc., showing support for the project. And then finally, project details. That's going to be the project maintenance plan, project sustainability, site information, timeline, budget, etc. So the best applications here are going to provide a clear explanation of a thorough maintenance plan or how sustainability is going to be built into the project. They're also going to provide all of the requested documentation and attachments digitally per the application. And the project timeline is going to show realistic, detailed deadlines, and the project budget will include quotes, estimates, etc., from vendors or contractors. And then for those grant requests that are going to be part of a larger project, the portions that the grant itself, the improvement grant, are going to be expected to fund will be clearly identified in that documentation. So from there, we're going to hop into some of the grant requirements. So who's going to be eligible to apply? So very similar to our previous beautification grant, any voluntary neighborhood group, HOA, or group of 3 or more neighbors are going to be eligible to apply. Now that 3 or more neighbor component, if you're not yet registered with the city as a group, we are going to ask that you go ahead before you finish your application and register with us. It's a very simple process. It's basically a 1-page form that we email you and you fill out and send it back. And we get you registered. And on top of being eligible for grants and other opportunities like this, it also provides your group with information on nearby development and a couple other opportunities such as our newsletter and things like that. All of the groups that apply must be within the city limits of Aurora. This is a city grant, so we've got to work within the city. And then religious and political organizations are not going to be eligible to apply by themselves. So then what's going to qualify for funding? And again, it's set up to $5,000 per project. So, and these are very general buckets that we'll kind of delve a little bit more into later with Meg. But generally, the projects that can be funded are going to be projects that bring neighbors together to have fun and get to know one another. Any projects that help clean up or beautify the community. And the sorts of projects that we can't fund generally are going to be projects that aren't going to have a lot of visibility to the public or have community impact. Projects that don't meet city code, we've got to stick to our own rules. Projects on private property for the sole benefit of the property owner. This is a little bit different, and we'll get a little bit more into that than what we had done in previous versions of the grant, in the beautification grant. Before, we allowed no work on private property generally. There are some exceptions now that we can work with that we'll get into a little bit. Then finally, no food, drink, or party materials. If those are things you are looking for, we do have other grant opportunities that can fund some of those items, and that information is currently available on our website, or you're more than welcome to reach out to one of us and we can discuss those opportunities. So why would anybody apply? Because it can certainly be a good chunk of paperwork to apply. So the big piece is the $5,000, or perhaps the most obvious piece is that $5,000 in funding per project. One of the other and perhaps the most valuable pieces with it are actually the fees that we are going to waive for the project to be done. So lots of projects, when they come in, will require some form of city-related documentation or process associated. Oftentimes, for example, if you're making changes that would require a site plan change, there will have to be an appropriate change. And a big one that happens often is landscaping, for example. If you're changing out all of your material or you're adding trees in, you want to make sure the site plan matches what's actually out on site. That can actually be an extremely costly process to work through those processes. So the city actually will waive all of those associated fees if your project is awarded. So that can sometimes be, depending on the scope of the project, one of the bigger benefits that we offer through this. The other is assistance from city experts. And this ties back to those referral contacts that I had mentioned earlier, and we'll speak a little bit more about later. Where, again, if you're looking to do, for example, let's say, again, a landscaping project where everybody's looking to redo an entryway or something along those lines with volunteer labor, for example, our team from water may be able to help you discuss, xeric or more water-wise options. Talking to our Parks, Recs, and Open Space group, they may have some input there as well. So just the opportunity to kind of talk to our subject matter experts and get their opinions is usually quite valuable. So lessons learned. With that, I will go ahead and throw it over to Meg.
Great. Thank you, Scott. So these are some, when we say lessons learned, we have been doing grants for the last handful of years, over the last almost decade, and we've learned a lot of things. And so we would like to pass along those lessons learned to you all, which will help you have a better application and an easier process. So the first thing that's really important is that we have to find out the property ownership and we have to get their approval. So this sounds like it should be easy, but it actually winds up being one of the more complicated things sometimes. Sometimes you think your HOA owns that land and it might be owned by Excel, for example. There might be various different examples. And so we'll want to figure out who that is and get their approval. So we want approval from the property owner, and that must be included in the application. This is not something to figure out later. This is something to figure out during that application process before you submit your final application. HOAs can include meeting minutes with the motion for approval or a letter of support from the board. So if you are a part of an HOA and you're trying to do a project on HOA owned land, that's one of the two ways that you can show approval, either through that letter or through a motion that is written in the minutes. We do need to have that written in one of the two ways. Voluntary groups must include a letter of support from the owner that owns the land, and preferably the owner will be on the application as one of the applicants. That would make a stronger application if we were to be able to have that. What we mean by voluntary groups are maybe groups that don't have an HOA and they're just a neighborhood group that doesn't have private land that they own together. And so somebody owns that land. And so we would need permission from that person. And if the city owns or maintains the property, you will need permission from the department that is responsible for the area. An example might be a median, it might be area at a park, it might be along open space, along a trail, something of that sort. All right, Scott, you want to go to the next? The next thing that we've learned is that we need to find out about easements and right-of-ways. And this is something that can be kind of complicated and that the city is here to help you with. So if your project is in an easement or right-of-way, a revocable license is required. So a right-of-way usually might be along a street. So I see a message from Linda. That might be along a street. This is why we will send you to a department that is in charge of it, which is called real property. And they will tell you who owns that or if there are any easements on that property. Easements might be that there is, oil and gas. It might mean that there is a sewer line under there. It might mean all sorts of things. And right of way means that is land that is technically owned by the city. A revocable license specifies what improvement is being made, the location and documents, and who has the maintenance for responsibility for that. And if your project isn't funded, but you want to move forward, you will still need to get the revocable license and you will still have to pay the fee. So if, for example, one of our departments tells you that you need to get that, just because you don't get grant funded, that doesn't mean that those requirements are not there. And why we say this is we've had people say, well, we'll just do it without the city and then we won't have to go through their process. And the processes that we're telling you are requirements from the city in general. So that's why that's really important. Scott, you want to go to the next one? Next one is neighborhood support and awareness. So we want you to build support and awareness for your project so that neighbors are informed and have the opportunity to express their concern or support or participate in the project. Include in the application how you inform neighbors about the project. And applications can include a support petition or a neighborhood newsletter or a bulletin board post. It can mean different things. And why this is important is we've had examples in the past where the committee that was applying wanted to do art, for example. And you all have heard the saying, art is in the eye of the beholder. Well, the application committee loved the art and the rest of the neighborhood was not really keen on what they had chosen. And so we don't want to get to a point where your neighborhood is really upset at the project that you have tried. Obviously we can't get everyone to agree on everything, but we want to try to show more majority support. Scott, you want to go to the next one? Maintenance needs. This part is really important because every project will have an ongoing maintenance or sustainability needs. You want to make sure you address how maintenance will be handled over time and who will be responsible for the maintenance costs. And every year we'll have people say, oh, there'll be no maintenance needs. And that's just not true. What if you were to install a bench and the paint started coming off the bench, for example? Who would be the one to repaint that bench? Or keeping up with the weeding if it's landscaping, or the watering? Who would be responsible for that? So that is something that's really important for who will be in charge of that maintenance, understanding that there will not be further funding from the city for that project. So what would be the plan to keep up with that maintenance? Go ahead, Scott. Another thing is we have a requirement that you meet with your referrals. So what you're going to do is you're going to meet with one of us, your community engagement coordinator, and we will refer you to other departments because they have information that will be of use for you. This is really important because when you're starting, you might not even know what you don't know to research, right? So what we want to do is we want you to kind of, once you have a really kind of good idea that you've kind of marked out, we want you to come meet with your community engagement coordinator, and then we'll connect you with the city departments who can give you the right advice and counsel and give you the right information. Successful applications will address the feedback that you receive from your referrals, And the referral context will not assist you in brainstorming project ideas. So it's really important that you have scheduled some time with them only after you've solidified your project idea and goals. You've gathered current and relevant documentation, and then you go speak to them. Something that's also important with this is that you don't wait till the last minute to write at the time of application, because they also are doing all the myriad of other things that they're doing for their job. And if every application came in at the right last minute and wanted them to do the reviews, the odds are you might not get that input. So it's important to plan, start thinking ahead, and we've given you, I think, a good amount of time to get that done, but we just want to give you a heads up on that. Scott, next. Traffic impacts. So this is something that a lot of people might not know about, and the traffic impacts can really impact your project. So if your project requires a sidewalk or lane of traffic to close, you must provide a traffic control plan for review and approval before any work is started. Our Traffic Division of Public Works can help you determine if your project would require the closure of a lane or sidewalk, and the cost of any traffic control plans, cones, barricades, or other traffic control devices should be included in your budget and accounted for in your timeline. I'll give you some examples of lessons learned. We had one group that wanted to, that needed a traffic control plan. They did the traffic control plan. They reached out to a different company to get their barricades. It was someone that they knew in the neighborhood. And for some reason, that company never showed up with the barricades, but the group went ahead and did their plan anyway without closing off the street lane. And so that is like what we don't want to have happen, is if those barricades do not show up, then you do not move forward that particular day with the plan. This is for your safety as volunteers, for driver safety, and for people walking along the sidewalk. This might include if you're having a truck drop off a thing of mulch, for example, or rock to do landscaping or things of that sort. There's lots of different reasons why that might happen, but those are just some common examples that we see. Okay, Scott? Landscaping related projects. City code requires automatic irrigation systems for new landscaping areas. Now, this is a really big thing that we kind of get some pushback on, but this is city code in the city of Aurora. And so you cannot hand water things with buckets. That doesn't include, that's not included, and it's not proper in our city code. Water conservation has a lot of online classes that can help you design and think about new ways to lower your watering requirements. We've had a lot of groups do that to cut down on their water bills. And sharp objects or spiky plants may not be planted near sidewalks. We've had some groups want to put in cactuses so people don't walk through their landscaping, and that is not possible. So just keep that in mind, what you're trying to put through. And large boulders may not be placed in the right of way. So this is really important. A lot of times, and this is something that you might have seen in the past, where you saw like large rocks at entrances, like at the corner where people turn off main arterials into your neighborhood. And so that's really important, that has to be scooted back a certain amount, and our traffic division will help you figure out where that is. You might have to, get your boulder size smaller, or put it back further than what you had intended originally. Scott? Okay, here's some other things to keep in mind. We have very few requirements of you to end your thing, but one of the things that we ask for is we ask for you to have, we have before and after photos. Why this is important is we want you to take photos that are from the same angle and that are good quality photos. So if you look at the first two on the left, as you can see, they're not really clear photos. They're not good digital photos. They might have been photocopied. That is not a good photo, because what we're trying to do in the end is show our projects, like, look at, this is a good before, what happened, and this is the great improvement and beautification that they have done. Oh, wait, can you go back, Scott, 1 second? Also the ones on the right, do you see this was a project we got and it was a great project, but the before and the after were not from the same angle. So we want you to anticipate where that project might be, and we want you to snap a photo before you start showing us, and then snap a photo from the same angle. So it's a really clear project of before and after. Okay, Scott? So this is a pretty good example of before and after. They're similar angles. They don't have to be exact, but do you see how this shows it shows like a really good example of what improvement of where it wasn't very beautiful and then it was a lot more improved on the right. That? Okay, some things to keep in mind. We have a budget form, which is one of the documents that's on the website for you to download and fill out. One thing that's really important on the budget, several things, is we don't want you to just put attached proposal. Okay, we get that a lot on applications. We don't want you to just like have your landscaping company write out a proposal. We want you to transfer that information so it fits our budget and we can compare apples to apples. So on this example, they just put attached proposal and attach that proposal. So we don't want, so that's no. I feel like I want to go yes, no. Okay, and then the next one, this is something that's good so that they have kind of transferred that information from the proposal and they have added that in there. Also letting us know on the budget, it's really important to let us know. A lot of groups will add in part of our money, will add in our money, but they're also adding their additional funds into the program. And so also letting us know the total picture for the budget for the entire project, and then let us know what you would be using the city funds for. For example, maybe you want to do a landscaping project and it's $5,000, but since we don't pay for the party afterwards to have your neighbors come celebrate the new project, you could put in there that that you were going to have some food or some beverages, things like that. Or you could add in that our total project is $20,000. We're applying for $5,000, but our HOA, for example, will cover the other $15,000. So those are just some examples that can look like lots of different things, but those are some examples for that. Yes, yeah. All right, here are some popular projects, and we want to let you know, and we'll show you at the end. I think Scott will go to the website at the end just to show what documents exist. But these are some popular projects. These don't have to be the project that you do, but what we intend these meetings to do is if you're coming and you don't know where to start yet, we want to give you some ideas that might be popular projects that we've had. So one of the one is a cleanup event, and that can look like several different things. That can look like where your neighbors bring their trash and you have a roll off at a school parking lot, for example, or at the swimming pool of your HOA parking lot or something of the sort. Or it can look like you might rent like a truck and have volunteers go through alleys, for example, and clean up different things, put it in the truck, and then put it in a roll off to be taken away. Community message boards. So those are that, several neighborhoods might have something that has some glass kind of over it, so it's protected from the elements. It might have something that says, we're doing a dance class, or we're having a presentation about, such and such a thing, or we're having our community neighborhood meeting on Thursday night at 6 p.m., for example. So those are popular. Community benches, we've had people want to put them either in parks, by swimming pools, by their community area. We've had memorial benches if somebody that was important to their neighborhood passed away and they wanted to have that on a walking trail near their area. So those are some ideas. This is something we've done in the past, but it's a little bit different. So this is called community placemaking, and we'll have more information in the idea book that we have online. But this could be a community mural on a business in your neighborhood or on the side of your HOA building or at a park. It could be a sculpture, or it could be art wraps that maybe are around a traffic box where all the, at like main corners. If you've seen some of these, we have quite a few of these in Northwest Aurora. I've seen some in other communities as well. And it's a way to take a, a not so pretty box that's just metal and just sitting there and make it be kind of artful and beautiful and colorful. You might do a little free library or a little free food pantry. So these are where it's a little house, it's on a pole. The little free libraries have books and magazines and things that maybe art supplies there, that it's kind of that concept of leave one, take one, if that people can kind of share resources or books you've already read. As well as little free food pantries, which are really important, especially during the pandemic. You can add some extra food that you have that either you bought or you have at your house that you're not going to need. And then somebody is in charge of really checking in and making sure there's nothing perishable in there, and that the little free food pantry is filled up regularly. You might do a community building event, and this we've had one of these before. We really like these as well. Say for example, your neighborhood decided to buy a whole bunch of flower pots and dirt and some paints, and had the kids in the neighborhood, this is just an example, had some kids in the neighborhood paint the flower pots, and everybody in your cul-de-sac or in your HOA area got a flower pot or something of the sort, or wind chimes. This could be as creative as you make it. I'm just coming up with some examples, but you could come up with some even more beautiful examples. And this is a new one that we have authorized previously. We did not allow anything to be on private property. This is the one exception, and this is called the Neighborhood Improvement Days. So this is where neighborhood gathers for small improvements to neighbors' homes. That might be, you need to replace the numbers on houses. Somebody really needs help on a little bit more mulch because their front yard needs some upkeep. Maybe trimming some low-hanging tree branches, or raking up their yard. Scott, do you have any other ideas? Or maybe power washing a driveway of some sort if there's a lot of oil on the driveway, or maybe painting your mailboxes, for example. So this is not just for one person to apply to have this happen. This is the caveat here. This would be for like a whole block, or several blocks, to get together and for all of you to work together to improve each other's homes, to get to know each other and really do some improvements for things that people might want to do. Right, next one, Scott. So what is the application? So the application, as we stated this year, in the past, we've had people email it or bring it in person. During the pandemic, the city is not currently open. So this will be in the presentation, and it's also on the website. So you don't have to write down this link. It'll be available for you. But it's a form. It's really easy to use. You just have to click on it, fill out the information, and that application is due on April 22nd by 5 p.m. So that's the deadline, and our system tells us when it arrives. So there won't be any late applications. So make sure that if worst comes to worst, maybe do it a couple days in advance, just so that you can verify that we've received it. That would be really great. We're more than happy to confirm in an email that we received it. And all applications must be submitted online. So if this is something that you feel like you are not able to do, this is a great time to reach out to your neighbors and to build your committee with people that can help support you with this. And none of these grants are made for just one person to do. It's really made for a group of neighbors to get to know each other, work together, and lots of people in your neighborhood, I guarantee, have lots of skill. So that's how the application goes. Next, Scott. And all applications will include the following attachments. And so first you'll fill out the application, and then there will be attachments that will come in. Those attachments will be submitted via email, and we'll explain that more it has a lot more information in the guidebook. So you'll want to have complete contact information. There will be a primary person that will take the lead, and then there will be other secondary and tertiary contact information. A clear description of the project, including the address or specific location. This is really important. If I'm going to drive by where you're going to do it, I need to be able to have enough information to be able to find it and be able to drive by. I can't tell you in the past where we have circled and circled and tried to find the location. It's been difficult. So we want a good description. It's on the northwest corner of such and, these two streets, or it's on the south side of such and such a building, and here's the address. We want really specific information. A complete sketch or aerial map of the project showing where the improvements will be made. So this might be, a picture of a Google map. It might be a picture. It might be a picture in a Word document with a, circle around it. We just want to be able to see and kind of understand where it is in relationship to the things around it. We want digital color photos of the area to be improved. So this is an important fact. You will be attaching, those to an email. We want them, like we talked about before, to have the photos before you start, and then we'll need the post photo as well. We would like to have the property ownership information for the site. So that might look like, sometimes it's Excel Energy. You thought it was your neighbor's land. You thought it belonged to your HOA, but it actually belongs to Excel, for example. So that we'll need to know who owns that and that they've given their authorization. And documentation showing the approval for the project for property easement and the owners. We also will want any signed forms related to the completion of the project, and all this you'll find out when you're meeting with your city referrals. So don't get too scared about that. We'll help you figure out what those forms are. A detailed project timeline. So a bad timeline would be like, we'll have it done by October 31st, right? That doesn't give me enough detail. But a good project timeline might say, starting in May, we'll start to gather and plan out the flowers we're going to pick. In April, we're going to go shopping at the store, and we're going to get those documents. We're going to do the project on such and such a weekend, and we will water it and have it all. We'll do it over 2 weekends, for example, if it takes more time, and we'll have it all completed by such and such a deadline. So we want, kind of a detailed timeline of, we want you to think it through, and that can change. Things can happen. Your timeline can change, but we want to see that you've thought it out and thought about the actual natural progression of what that project might look like. We want you to have a well-researched budget. So that might be that you've gone online and looked at Home Depot, for example, and you've seen that you need to buy for your cleanup, you need grabbers, and you need plastic bags, and you need gloves. I'm just making stuff up. Okay. So I'm not saying it has to be this, but you've researched that you think you're going to have 20 volunteers and you need 20 pairs of gloves, and it's this much for those 20 pairs of gloves and trash bags and things like that. So printing off an estimate online would be good enough. Or how much you're going to buy and how much you're going to need a professional services to help with that. Also an explanation of how the project will positively impact the neighborhood. Also the list of names and addresses of volunteers committing to work on your project. Why this is really important is we have had actually some groups have to give back their money because their volunteers kind of kaput it on them. And this lady is like, I just don't have the physical ability to do this project all on my own, and all my volunteers have canceled on me. So a commitment, that they're willing to help support this project, and it's not just one person trying to do the project. Okay, Scott, the next. So we're going to show you, if you don't know what ward you're in, the city of Aurora is broken into 6 different wards. I am in charge of wards 1, 2, and 3. and Scott is in charge of wards 4, 5, and 6. And so after you get kind of a pretty good idea or a semi-baked idea of what you want to do, you're going to reach out to your community engagement coordinator, and you're going to take a look at, you're going to set up a meeting. We'll send you a video call like we're doing now. We'll do a call with you. We'll talk through your project. We'll say, have you thought about this? You know, maybe it'd be better to do that. What if you did it over here? We'll tell you who you need to contact within the city, and we'll send you a form that will tell you who you need to follow up with in the city. So we're here as your support because we have lots of experience over all the last years doing this. We have a pretty good idea of who you might need to talk to and the types of things you need to keep in mind. You'll want to make sure to meet with us on or before March 25th of 2022. So that means reaching out to us earlier rather than later. Don't reach out to us at 4 p.m. and say, oh my gosh, can you meet with me on that last day? Okay, so setting up appointments, because quite possibly we're going to be meeting with a lot of people and we'll need to schedule those meetings. Those meetings take, what would you say, Scott? Maybe about an hour, a little less. It could be less than that, but usually it's right around an hour. We're willing to meet with you in the evening if you work. We're willing to meet with you on lunch hours. So we're flexible as long as it works with our schedule to find a time that works well for all of you. Okay, next, Scott. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you, if you don't know what city council ward you live in, and Scott, maybe let's take this down and go to the web page. We're going to show you how to find your grant. So what you're going to do is first you're going to go to the city webpage, which is www.auroragov.org. And you're going to go down, scroll down to these kind of turquoise boxes and see where Scott is clicking, where it says property info. You're going to click on property info. Go ahead, Scott. And you're going to scroll down a little bit and see that box where it is, where he has his cursor there. And Scott, why don't you type in the city building and we'll show them. What you want to do is you want to type in, a lot of times just type in just the number of your address. The system is a little slow to kind of gather it, and see how the city building's address is 15151. And so it shows us all of the addresses within the city that have 15151, but he's trying to find East Alameda Parkway. So he just clicks on East Alameda Parkway. And it's going to zoom in and it's going to show you an aerial of your house. So this is the city building, but it's going to show you your house. And then you can go down to those little links down below. And if you go to My Government, it's going to tell you what ward you're in. So the city building is within Ward 3, and you'll see your council number there where it says Ward 3 Ruben Medina. So that tells us that that's the council number for the city of Aurora's building, the area around there, and you are in Ward 3. So if you were in Ward 3, that means I'm your community engagement coordinator, and so you would reach out to Meg Allen. If that came up and that was wards 4, 5, or 6, then you would reach out to Scott Campbell, and our contact information is in this information. Scott, while we're here, do you want to just show a couple of the other functions, and I'll let you describe that are part of this, because I think it's a great tool if you don't know about it. I think it's really great to know.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the other great ones too, if you kind of remember that you're supposed to reach out to one of us, but you can't recall which one of us covers which areas, if you click on the My Neighborhood tool, it'll show you quite a bit. It'll show you if you have any registered groups that kind of sit over your address. There may be multiple. Some groups cover large areas. This group here in particular, Clean, they actually cover the whole city. They're our largest group. You also see, however, who your community engagement coordinator is, as well as our contact information. So that's always very, very helpful in my opinion. You can also take a look at property information here, which will link you out to Arapahoe County's assessor information with these various links here. You can see kind of subdivision information, all of that kind of good stuff. If you've got, you can see your zoning if you're really interested in that, all of that kind of fun stuff. And then I think the final tab we haven't checked out are the city services, which kind of just link to other various parts of our website, like our job search and all of that kind of fun stuff. And with that, unless there's something else, Meg, you think we need to call out, we can jump back into the presentation to kind of wrap things up here.
I think that's great. What I was thinking is while we're on the website, should we just
Yeah.
show the web page where the
Let's
link,
do
where the
it.
grants are while we're there? I just thought since
Yep.
we're there, let's go ahead and do that. So if you can either go to the city website, www.auroragov.org, and just type in grants, and it will bring in neighborhood grants that were the top link there. Or you can go to www.auroragov.org/neighborhood grants, and it's going to give you all the information. This is the page that it will bring up, and it has lots of good information. That's kind of a summary there of it. If you scroll down, it talks about the 3 community meetings, and thank goodness you guys are already here, so we have that. The application, under there, if you click on that link, it'll take you to the application. And this is that link to do the application. So it's really easy. You just click on the box, start typing in there, and type in the information that you need to, and it'll lead you to all the different parts. And then if you go down also to on the left, there's the guidebook and the project ideas. This guidebook it's going to give you like way more information than we've even gone over today. It's really, we spent a lot of time on this. I think that it goes over the table of contents, grant overview, definitions of things, and go ahead and scroll, Scott. That's fine. And it just kind of walks you through piece by piece what's going to be a good application. It's going to tell you all the deadlines there. It's going to talk about our general guidelines, what we can fund and what we can't fund. It's going to talk about, what would be a good application, what that award criteria is. It's going to show you our rubric. Scott, can you scroll down just a little bit, just to that box? Or up, sorry. Sorry. And so it's going to show you how each of those categories are weighted. And I think this is really important for you to notice, as for those of you that might have done the separate grant process, which is the beautification grant before. We want to make sure that you know that this is a new grant. So it's a new grant, new times, some new requirements. So we don't want you to just default to that old process. This will explain, what project details go in and what will make a successful grant. Okay, go ahead, Scott, scrolling down. We'll talk about the criteria breakdown and what each of those kind of categories mean. How you'll find out about getting the award notices. It'll talk about how the various ways that we can help pay for that grant and how you'll get those funds. So it'll explain all of that. Go ahead, Scott. And staff assistance. This goes more into detail about all the different things that each of those departments might need to help you with when we make those referrals. And then it gives the contact information for all of those people, which will also send you a referral form that'll give that information when we send you there. And keep going. Is that it?
That's the end. Yep.
That's it. Okay. And then Scott, can you also go to the idea, the project? So this is called the project idea book. And this just gives examples of some of those projects that we have said are like easier projects that we know people have loved and have been able to do, but that doesn't mean that you can't do that. So here's some examples of just different information about neighborhood cleanup. Go ahead, Scott. This is those community message boards. This is just an example of what that might look like. Community benches. These are what we were talking about, are those wrapping of the utility boxes, for example. It can be really pretty and artful and add some color to the neighborhood. It could be like a mural on a business in your neighborhood or something of the sort if they were to buy into that. Obviously, you have to get their permission. These are the little free libraries or little free food pantries, you know, something what that might look like. Those are that kind of flower pot idea that we had given you, that community building. That's not the only example of it, but that's just an example that you might want to think about. Those neighborhood improvement days, you know, if you're going to be doing some landscaping or helping, you know, kind of add some colorful flowers to everyone's, you know, landscaping, etc. And we do want to include a very popular thing that has come up over and over are the neighborhood ID signs. And Scott, I think you want to go over this part because I think this is an important caveat here.
Yeah. So historically, if anyone had applied with our previous, the beautification grant, there at one point we were allowing for new installation of neighborhood signs. At this point, with this grant, we will allow for the refurbishment of existing neighborhood ID signs. So we won't go out and install new ones, but we will absolutely refurbish existing older ones that need kind of to be freshened up. This was something we had kind of learned over time, as Megan kind of pointed to before. The big reason we don't allow new signage is because generally you're going to want the entire community to agree to whatever that design is ultimately going to be. If you're refurbishing something, you're really just kind of either sprucing it back up or replacing it to what it originally was. And you don't necessarily need everybody to agree on whatever that new piece, look, or aesthetic may be. So that's kind of why we will allow still for repairs, replacement, or refurbishment of signs, but not installation of new neighborhood ID signage.
Another challenge that we have seen over the years is if you're not in an HOA that owns the land, a lot of times that land is owned. It's like you might want to put a sign up on the fence that's actually owned by one of your neighbors. And so they're actually taking on the responsibility for fixing the sign if there's a car accident and it smashed through your sign. Or what if they move out of the neighborhood and then somebody who buys the house is saying, wait a second, I didn't sign on to take care of this. So it just became really, really complicated. And also, we had some designs of signs where the neighbors said, wait a second, what is that? I don't like that. We didn't agree that that was our, you know, sign design. So it just got really complicated. And frankly, to do a whole new sign with our only $5,000 really also is not super possible. So we're able to spruce things up, but we're just not able to do any brand new signs. So and then the landscape enhancements, this is a very popular one all the time. Adding in mulch, adding in some rock, adding in flowers and bushes and trees and things of that. You can be pretty creative going xeric like Scott talked about, and doing low water maintenance. That's also a very popular project. And community gardens are sometimes. Now, I do want to let you know that community gardens, it's really not possible to do a community garden with $5,000. So all of the ones that we have had with community gardens have been, our money was going into a bigger pot of money that they were going to use, if that makes sense. So it can be 20, 40, $50,000. A lot of times community gardens might be in an HOA area. We've had people put benches in at their community gardens as well, because they already had the community garden. One year we had someone do a pergola to kind of provide shade at the community garden. So there also can be associated things in a, you know, that enhance the community garden. Maybe it's some plants, but starting from scratch with a community garden is not possible with $5,000. So we just want to give you that heads up.
I think that's the end of that document.
I think that's up. And so, so all of this information is here. And Scott, while we're here, I was thinking, let's go over the mini grants also really quickly while we have people just to highlight, just so you know that they're here. We also have 3 new grants that are available that started last year. This will be our 2nd year. We want you to know about these. The first one is a Know Your Neighbor mini grant. This allows you to get a $100 King Soopers gift card, and it allows you to do like a block party, a barbecue, something where you're inviting all of your neighbors. So that is something. And so this might be something if you were going to celebrate, like, you know, the whatever project you did and you wanted to celebrate how beautiful it looks. You know, we can't pay for food and drinks, but you could apply for the Know Your Neighbor grant in addition to the neighborhood improvement grant to supply those things. And we would give you $100 gift card, and you'd be able to use that at King Soopers to be able to buy those items. The second grant is called our Printing Assistance Mini Grant. This is for those of you that might not have a printer at home, and we will not design your flyer for you, but like if you needed to make photocopies, we're able to get you 25 flyers in color, or a 500 in black and white, or 10 color posters, or 20 black and white posters. And why that is important, this might help you get the word out about your project. So this also might help you, you know, make the flyers or help print things that might help you get the word out. If you don't have like HOA, sometimes we'll have like a, you know, an email list or a Facebook group or a newsletter, but neighborhoods that don't have HOAs sometimes don't have that. So this would be a really good way to support you in that. And then the last grant is our Small Neighborhood Activity Mini Grant. And this is a good way. This is up to $250 based on your budget and your grant. No matches required. And this is something that you can help buy things that might be a little bit more sustainable for your neighborhood. This is an example we've been given is, say for example, on your street, you wanted to have a happy hour on Fridays, you know, and invite the neighbors out to your driveway and something like that. We've had some neighbors buy those pink flamingos that like stick in the yard, and they would put them in their yard, and everybody knew that on Friday at 5 o'clock there was happy hour at that neighbor's yard, and they would bring their camp chairs and a beverage of their choice, and then the person who was hosting would provide, you know, appetizers or something to eat, and they were able, so it's community building. That might be, we had a question, are the mini grants separate from the 60,000 improvement? That's a great question, Heather. Yes, so these are separate and they can all be applied for. That what applying for one does not preclude you from getting one of the other ones. So that's a really great question. And I also saw a question from Meredith that asked, can you save the application and come back to it? And I think, Scott, the answer is no on that.
I don't believe so. If that's kind of what you would like to do, what I would recommend is opening the application and kind of copying the questions out. Some of them are fairly simple, you know, it's just asking for like contact information. Some of them do require kind of longer narratives, if you will. So for those ones, yeah, I would recommend going in and just, you know, if you do need more time, you think just copy those questions, you know, type them up on a separate document and then either paste them in when you're ready or whatever you need to do.
And Scott, maybe I was thinking about this. Maybe we could take those questions and put it in a draft document. That's not something to be turned in, but it can be like a sample list of the questions so that people could get prepared. We could probably do that tomorrow, don't you think?
Yep. Yep. I think we can get that up there.
I'm thinking about it logically because sometimes you can't get through to the next page if you haven't filled it out on the form.
Yep.
So we'll do that. And then that way that we'll get that up on the website tomorrow or Friday at the very latest, I think. To just and that way that'll be available so you can search through and see what you need to gather. I think that would be a nice attachment for us to do that. So we'll do
great question.
Yeah, great question. And then another question, does the improvement grant apply to nonprofits? So that's a good question. I would say yes and no. I would say you would want to get residents around your nonprofit to be a part of that. The intent of this grant really is for neighborhoods and residents working together. So it's not specific to just nonprofits. Or Scott, how would you describe that? But I think you'd want
Yeah,
to get other residents around you
it's
to
yeah,
participate if they were going to benefit from it. Is that a good
absolutely. Yeah,
explanation?
so I would think of it as in like the nonprofit itself, because it's not necessarily a group of residents, wouldn't be able to apply as just the nonprofit, right? But the nonprofit could go find 3 or 4 neighbors that are either, in reasonable proximity or that are interested in the type of work they're doing, and have those residents in partnership with the nonprofit apply as kind of like a joint type thing. And throughout the application, obviously you'd want to reference how that would actually look and work and feel. But that's kind of how I would recommend if you're like a nonprofit or one of the other groups that wouldn't necessarily get one of our wouldn't be eligible otherwise, I suppose.
So I'll give an explanation of some things we've seen in the past. We saw this nonprofit apply that had a community garden, and they got residents to apply with them. And and it was the residents that were going to be able to participate in that community garden. So whereas the nonprofit was the initial applicant, we've also had schools apply in the past for like community gardens or improvements of that sort. So it's going to be things that were going to benefit the community, but it wasn't just for that nonprofit. So I don't know if that's clear. And Mr. Bill Scott just asked if he could see page 28 of the slides.
Oh, yep.
If we could go back to that, page 28. And Mr. Bill, this presentation will be on the website, so you don't have to, fast and furious copy all of this. This will be available for you all to be able to access. Carol just said, thank you for this information, all your work to help us understand the steps to take the projects that can be funded. She'll be in touch with you, Scott. So thanks, Carol. We appreciate that. And then do we have another? Mr. Bill, can you kind of see what that looks like? And obviously you'll have the link. The link is on the website. So you don't have to copy down like every little of these weird little letters and
Yes.
numbers. We just want to be clear about that. The link is on there. So again, so here's some city resources that are available. And Scott, do you want to go over this part?
Yeah. So these again are going to be those referral contacts that we'd referenced. This is just kind of some general information about who they are and kind of why you're probably going to want to talk to them if we kind of refer you that way. Again, though, if and when we get to the point of actually making the referrals to you, we will absolutely give you another form that has the specific referrals we want you to talk to, as well as some notes about why we think you should talk to them. So that way, when you go meet with them, you can kind of either send it to them, say, here you go. We will also let them know that we have spoken to you once we do, and that we are kind of going to ask you to come to them. So it's not going to be a total blindside by any means, but this will just give you a little bit more information on why you might want to talk to these referrals in particular. They can discuss the feasibility and options based on your goals. But again, we do want to point out they're not really going to be there for brainstorming. So we really want you to have a really solid idea of at least what your project goals are. Of course, they can help you kind of work through how you want to get to those goals, but you want to make sure you have those goals in place first. And again, you want to make sure you have any relevant documentation that you think they may want to look at or need. So first off is traffic department. It's going to be Stephen Gomez. Traffic's going to help you determine if any lane closures are going to be needed. That's generally the most common thing if you're working adjacent to a roadway. Over in Aurora Water, we have Zach. Water Conservation just has a ton of information about really, anything that's going to have to do with landscaping. They are a wonderful resource because they can tell you about all of the water-wise or xeric materials. They've got all kinds of online courses. They actually also have rebates if you are looking for other opportunities that could theoretically be used in conjunction with ours, assuming theirs is still going. And I think theirs is on a rolling basis annually, so it probably just reset if I had to guess. But certainly something we can dig into with Zach. Real property is going to be Grace Gray. So real property is going to help determine if there's any easements, rights of way, or any other site-specific information that may need to be considered. Over in planning, we have Liz, and planning is going to assist in determining if any amendments are going to be needed for any site plans or any of that sort of documentation. And they can also help you access other documents on file with the city. Over in pros or parks, recreation, and open space, we have, I think Ryan, I think is how you pronounce his name, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, they can help kind of determine what parameters are going to be followed for projects that are going to involve city parks or open space. And then finally, we have Dora over in permitting, who can help determine any permits that may be required in relation to your project. And with that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing so we can kind of see each other a bit better, but now we'll have time for some questions.
You can either unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can type in the chat and we can read it, because the odds are there, as we always talk about, there are no stupid questions, and the odds are if you have a question, somebody else has the question. So please ask away. And
somebody asked about being able to download the application, fill it out, and then upload it. Is that available?
That is not available. So, but we will get that sample application so you can kind of type up your answers, and then you could cut and paste it into the application. So that will be available, but you do want to have all your materials prepared to go ahead and submit the application. That's a great question.
If you have pictures to attach or quotes or other information along with that, can you provide attachments along with your online application?
So you'll send that to either, if you're one of Scott's projects, you'll send it to Scott. If you're one of my projects, you'll send it to me in an email. And you can just put, like your group name in the subject line, neighborhood improvement grant, and, add all of your attachments, like the budget and the, any before pictures and any proposals, any other documents you think we need to know, like the petition, anything like that will come in an email attachment. And what's good about that is it will have like a timestamp so that we can prove that, it came in, and you'll have confirmation that you have that. Great.
And the one thing I would kind of point out to help kind of consider or think about the process, there's kind of two halves to it. One is the form application we have, which is going to capture a lot of the basic information. And then the other half of it is kind of the attachments that you're going to email out to the coordinators. And that'll be kind of the more in-depth documentation. So that'll be all your photos, like you said, all the estimates that you get in, all of that kind of stuff. That'll be emailed. And in the background, we as the staff are going to tie all that together to present it to the decision-making body so they can get a really clear idea of kind of what you're looking to do. One other thing I'll point out, so as you're filling out the application, the points where we will ask for that documentation, those extra pieces, budget is one of them. It was kind of difficult to get a good budget form on that website. So there's just kind of a little radial button that you click that says, yep, I'm sending you the form, no worries, it'll be there, that sort of thing. So all of the pieces where we do require a attachment, that's kind of going to have something similar to that, just you basically saying, okay, not a problem, I'll send you that attachment. In addition to that, if there are any pieces where you're trying to fill in verbiage, for example, like a narrative, and for some reason the system doesn't have enough room, I don't think that'll happen, but on the off chance it does, you're more than welcome for any of those sections that occurs. Just send us another email with like a Word doc or something else that has that narrative or whatever it is that you'd like us to know, and we'll make sure we insert that appropriately so it gets with your application.
So something really important to remember is that all the applications are competing, for the top prizes. So what's important is to pick projects that are good on community connections, that have good, support by the community, that are visible by the community, that aren't tucked back in the secret back corner of your neighborhood. You want to have some good visibility and just well thought out proposals. Have you researched what it would cost? Have you gotten good estimates? Have you thought about your good timeline? Have you answered the questions thoroughly? all that will really help you have a real dynamic application to compete. Any other questions who comprises the decision-making group? So the will be probably 4 city employees that all have different expertise. That it's not Scott, it's not Maria, and it's not myself. So we are here to support you through that application process. And then we have colleagues that have experience looking at site plans, looking at the codes and community engagement and things like that. So we've picked a well-rounded committee to be able to look at those applications. They will not be a part of these preliminary conversations, because we wanted to make sure that we are in support of your application. And then we will put all your documents together as a package for them to review and to be able to make a decision. So that's how that works. So Scott and I have always said, not it. We're like, wait, we don't want to be in trouble for not choosing, because we love working with all of you. So we want to make sure that is clear. That's a really great question. Thanks, Mary. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute or to put it in the chat, whatever is better for you.
And certainly, if you do have kind of one-off questions, later on down the road, later tonight or next week or whatever, again, feel free to reach out to us anytime. We're more than happy to answer one-off questions, do whatever we need to help support you all.
And what we want these meetings to be is, we don't want you to feel that you have to know what you're going to do, right? That's the purpose of these meetings, is for you to find out about the project, find out about the application process, start thinking, start getting the wheels going in your head, and then, reach out to us in a week or two, and say, so here's a good question from Rhonda. So one of the questions is, how often can you be awarded the grants? So for the neighborhood improvement grant, this is different. So we want to be clear. In the past, you might have received a neighborhood beautification grant. We're considering that a separate grant process that is closed. This is a brand new grant called the neighborhood improvement grant. So as of this year, everybody is eligible to apply, as long as you hit those requirements that we talked about. But we do have a requirement that you can't get this every year. So there will be, so keep in mind, in the past, some of you have had it where, like, every year you've applied and you've done a separate section of a project. You will not, those of you that do receive the grant this year will not be eligible to apply next year. So we want to give space to have new people have space to apply. So that's a really great question, Rhonda. But if you're talking about those other grants, so the small activity grant, the printing grant, and the Know Your Neighbor grant, those like the King Soopers gift card, etc., those you're eligible for once a year. And so you can apply once a year, and as long as you hit the requirements, we will give you and we haven't run out of funding. But last year we did not run out of funding, and so we really want you to encourage you to do those types of activities and get to know your neighbors. Another question from Stan: assuming that I'm approved for a grant, how that would involve an outside contractor's participation, how would they be paid, either by the city or would be given the funds to distribute? Great question, Stan. Let's talk about that. So there are basically 3 ways that you can get funded. So either your outside contractor could give you an invoice, and you could turn it into us, and we would pay the invoice through the city. So that's the first way, if they're willing to work via invoice. The second way would be if you're ordering something online, for example. Scott or I are more than happy to purchase those items with our city credit card to have them be delivered to your location, wherever you want those to be ordered from. Or 3, you can pay for it on your own and send us the receipts, and we can reimburse you for that money if you have the ability to carry that money. sometimes people just put it on their credit card, or their HOA has the ability to do that. What is important in that situation is remember that the city does not pay taxes. So if you were to pay for it yourself, you would pay for the taxes, and we would only be able to reimburse you for everything except for the taxes. So that's important to know, that you would have, that would be something you would be, you or your group, or however you figured it out, would be responsible for that.
There's,
Go ahead, Scott.
I was the other big thing with the reimbursement methodology, just as an FYI, if we do go down that route, we will, the city's policy requires we get a W-9 or the equivalent to be able to reimburse people. Not everybody's necessarily comfortable with that, because that means you're providing us with your social security number often. So just something to kind of keep in mind as you're kind of thinking through your project and how you want to proceed with that payment if you're awarded.
And that's just a city financial requirement. So we're sure of who we're paying. And we would need to see, oh, the other thing, and this is all in the guidebook, by the way, so you'll be able to read through all this. But something that's really important is that when you're getting paid through this process is to make sure to pay for it with a credit card, or there has to be not cash. So it can't be like, hey, my brother Bill, he paid that money, right? And we're not just going to reimburse him. We need to have some sort of receipt or some proof that that happened. So be sure to keep a hold of your receipts. Be sure to, and then the final thing is at the end, before October 31st. So that's the final date to have everything turned into us. The only two requirements are really, or we'll probably have an evaluation form too, but an evaluation form, your pictures. So you make sure we have good before and after pictures, and, turn in anything that needs to be paid for reimbursement. So I've worked in nonprofit most of my life, and this is the easiest grant I've ever seen in terms of, we're not going to make you write a huge report and do lots of complicated things. So we wanted to keep that easy, so it's easy for you all to do that final reporting. And did that answer your question, Stan? I want to make sure that I answered that. All right. Any other questions that you guys have? And we know your brains will be turning tonight, so that's why we're here. Reach out, shoot us an email, say, can we set up something? Or, hey, I have a quick question, or, okay, can we talk through this? Or that's what we're available for. And we're excited to have Maria as part of that. So we're going to be training her in all this lovely process. So she'll probably be joining us on those calls. So you'll get to know her as well, which we're thrilled about. So any other questions, or do you feel like for right now, Mr. Bill?
Yeah, you said something about eligibility for a grant if I've done grants in the past. Am I disqualified for doing a grant now because I've done grants in the past?
No, that's not what I said. What I said is the old grants is like its own separate thing. So we're starting over. This is the first year of the neighborhood improvement grant. So
Yes.
I said everyone is eligible this year for the neighborhood improvement grant. But next year, those who receive the grant will not be eligible because they received it this year. So we're doing kind of, you have like a year on, a year off for eligibility, just to make sure that we're getting.
So next year I can't do another grant.
Correct.
But the following year I can.
Correct. Great
Okay.
question. It's just that we've got
that before.
And that's why we have a lot of people who expect to get the grants every year as part of their budget. And we want to that we want to give lots of opportunity to lots of people that are able to participate, and not just the ones who have gotten it down year after year. So
Okay, all the grants I've done in the past doesn't disqualify me this year.
Nope, that's a separate grant. And so everybody is eligible as long as you hit all the other eligibility requirements. You're eligible this year. So this is like year one of the neighborhood improvement grant, if that makes sense. Great question, Mr. Bell.
Okay. I did see another question come across from Heather in the chat. She asks, if we are considering a large landscaping project, would we be able to do it in pieces, or is that a question for the water department? So it kind of depends, I guess, is kind of the best way to put it. So in light of kind of what Meg was just mentioning, there's one thing to keep in mind, that if you are thinking, and in the past, we have, through the beautification grant, allowed for kind of these multi-year projects more easily, because we did not have that year on, year off requirement. With that new year on, year off requirement, obviously it becomes a little bit more complicated, because you just don't, if you are awarded the first year, you don't even have the opportunity the second year. Of course, that doesn't matter so much if you are deciding that your HOA is going to pay for the second part the following year. The question in terms of, like, you know, where would that delineation be, is probably going to actually be a planning decision, is my guess, because what we would probably have to look at is your site plan, and see what the site plan calls out for landscaping on wherever it is that you're looking to do it. And, you know, there is a theoretical benefit to tying them together, because let's say you had, and I'm just making numbers up here, right? But let's say you had a football field of grass that you're looking to replace, and the first 50 yards of it that you're doing, you know, you want to do through our program and can pay for it. It's really great, because in addition to the actual materials and the labor and all that, again, one of the things that we waive are those associated fees. And those fees, when you're updating that planning documentation, can be extremely expensive to update. And so theoretically, if you can do it all at once, you're only doing that one document update, right? So theoretically, it's cheaper if you can bear that cost burden for the one time. If you split it into smaller projects and you have to go and update that site plan every single time you do a piece of it, obviously that just increases your cost because of the administrative costs related to it, even speaking aside from the labor and materials and whatnot. But again, that's something that once we kind of start getting into more of the details, that I think can be worked out with planning, and perhaps water may have something to add there as well.
And Scott, like going on with that example, another example I can think of is, say, for example, you're like, okay, year one, we're going to tear out all the stuff, right? And then it just is an empty, barren area. And then you think you're going to do the beautification the next year. That's not a good application, because that's not beautifying and improving the area. So I think you just have to weigh, you know, what would be those first steps that you'd want to do. But if you're doing it just like in sections, and you're going to go from, you know, zero to beautification and improvement in that area, then I think you would be fine. But just to keep in mind, some projects get uglier before they get before they get prettier. So we just want to make sure that was a part of your plan. Any other questions? Oh, one other question that is in the grant book, but it triggered because of your water-wise question, is remembering that even if you're doing xeric planting, that's another thing that we've learned, is you still need water. So water-wise plants do not mean zero water. And so we have people come in and say, oh, we're doing a xeric thing, we don't have irrigation and it's not needed. That is not true. It usually takes about the first 3 years of some, you know, heavier watering to get the plants, you know, nourished and strong, and then it can cut back on the water. So that is something that we've also learned over the years, is that you do need to include that irrigation, and just because it's low water, you will need water for those projects. So that's also something. Any other questions, or do we have it wrapped up for the moment?
I do see Heather had just a bit of a follow-up, kind of saying, she said, okay, thank you. The reason I asked is because in the newsletter, the WaterWise department said something about doing partials. They may have other parameters for some of their grants and offerings, so that may be what that is more speaking to. And again, theoretically, you can layer their programming on top of this. I don't know enough about the parameters of their grant or their timelines, so it's hard for me just to speak to the specifics in terms of, you know, lining it all up so it works. But in theory, it is possible. So that may have an impact. And obviously, if you are layering their processes and grants or offerings on top of ours, you know, you'd obviously have to follow all of their guidelines plus ours. So there may be something there with the partials. But again, we can absolutely you know, dig into that with planning and water to see kind of what the deal is. Uh,
May
go
I
ahead.
ask a question?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Daniel.
So if we have an event that we have annually to help the community, and and we've over the years we've had that, but it costs us money. Now we want to ask you, could you help us to subsidize our costs? Does it? So I'm wondering, how much does it need to be a new, uh, uh, suggestion to the community, or can it be asking you to, even, well, even add to what we're doing, or at least help us with what we've been doing?
I think I'd ask, and maybe we should follow up with a call to find out a little bit more about what that event is, because events in and of themselves aren't really qualifying for the grant. It's more, the improvement. But if you could give it, or if you'd like to give us just a little example of what that is, we could probably better
Well,
respond.
so for an example, Dan, I think you guys do generally a like one of the big dumpster kind of days, right? That's one of the events you all do. Yeah.
Exactly.
So something like that, you could absolutely apply for. We even call that out as one of the project types. It's not relevant to us if it's something you guys have been doing for a decade, or if this is the first year you want to do it. If it's a neat idea, and frankly, I think those community cleanups are really good and helpful when you all run them yourselves. So that would absolutely be something you guys could apply for. It's just going to be, again, you're just in competition with everybody else. So obviously your application is going to have to speak to kind of the pieces that we value, right, per the award criteria. But absolutely, you could come to us and say, look, we spend 10 grand a year on this, and we're asking you guys for 3 grand, 5 grand, whatever it happens to be, because it helps us in all of these enumerated ways, and this is how it's specifically going to have that impact. So yeah, you could absolutely do that.
Yeah, just
All right.
because you've done it before does not preclude you from getting funded. So that's a great question.
I saw another one come across from Juanita. How visible does the project need to be? That is a great question. It's hard to give you a specific example because, again, what you're going to ultimately be working against is kind of all of the other applications, right? So if we get a bunch of applications that come in and say, look, we're doing this big piece that's right along a major arterial road, and it's going to be extremely visible, and let's say we get 20 of those applications, but that has a much larger impact than if all of the applications were to come in and they're all for something that's interior to a neighborhood. So we can't exactly tell you what the delineation or the line is that you have to meet to say, yes, this is enough visual or visible to the community. What we're really trying to avoid with kind of that verbiage and those guidelines are people trying to do singular projects on like their house, or even with the neighbor project that we had mentioned, where everybody kind of does like the number replacement or the little fixes. Again, we want it to be a big street or community-wide thing, not like two neighbors who have kind of rundown houses just getting their stuff fixed up by their neighbors, sort of thing. And obviously, again, that's not any of those are set, and there's a degree of flexibility, and again, where you have to kind of compare what the other projects come in as. But that's essentially what you're looking for. So hopefully that gives you some context at least.
We just had another question in from Nabi. How do we submit a completely new idea, and what does the approval look like, or do we have to pick from the list only? That's a great question. So what you would do is exactly the same. Nabi, you would reach out to, depending on what part of town you live in, you would reach out to either Scott or I. We would have the conversation. You'd run through your idea. We would let you know whether that qualifies or not. We'll let you know based on these criteria, we think that that would qualify, or maybe if you tweaked it this way, it might qualify a little bit better. And then it's the exact same process. Is we will send you to the referrals and to the various different people that answer those that will answer those questions based on what you bring to us. And I think that's a really great question. We want to make sure that list of that we gave you, those are just some
Right.
ideas to get you started. We want
Mhm.
you to be creative. We want you to think outside of the box. Like all that
Yeah.
is encouraged. Okay. So
Okay.
I didn't want you to think, but sometimes people are like, I don't know where to start. And so
Yeah.
we created that list because it can help you get started. But if you have another
Mhm.
creative idea, by all means, please reach out to us and let's talk about it. I love that.
Okay. Thank you so much for answering that.
You're welcome. Great question. I hope we didn't come across as you can only do those. So that I'm really glad you asked that.
No, you actually didn't. But I'm a very creative, artsy kind of person, and in different realms, like I have an engineer as a son and friends that are engineers, so we kind of think outside the box. And I know a
love
bunch
it.
of teachers, and so I knew you didn't pose the list as these are the only projects, but I wanted to get direct clarification because I'm sure if I wanted to know, there probably was someone else that had the same question. So
Perfect.
thanks.
I'm so glad you asked that. So that's a great question. We want creativity. That's absolutely like I've already heard some of you, and I'm not going to point out which box that's doing some really crazy stuff that I think is fantastic and creative and like we love it. So please give us a call and let's talk it through and see if it's possible. I love that. Yep. Any other questions? We got y'all. You guys are pros. Got it figured out. All right. Well, we're so glad that you guys joined us. If you have anybody else that wants to learn about this, this is the first of 3 meetings. So if you look on the website, Nabi, I know you had put into the chat, I wish more people knew about this. So
Right.
please spread the word. And they can attend one of 2 more meetings. We have one that's at noon. That's like at somebody's lunch hour. And then we have
Okay.
another night meeting. They're both next week. And so just make sure that they attend one of our meetings. They can get all their questions answered. And we've been doing heavy social media, our newsletters. We've been putting it out all over the place. But
That might be a thing because I don't have like social media, and I'm kind of a recluse. So social media, when you say website, I just want to make sure I can share this to as many people as possible because in my mind, the more people do this, the more beautiful our state is going to be. So why
I
not?
agree with you. I agree with you 100%. So that if you do that, on our website is all the information with the links to the meetings, how to join, more, all these guidebooks, all those things we showed you. So please I think that's the best thing to share is the website link, and then that'll give them everything they need to know. And we hope that they join us for the 2 upcoming meetings next week. So Cynthia says, thank you for the meeting and information. You're welcome, Cynthia. Well, have a good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. It's so good to see all of your faces. We know a lot of your faces, and good to see new faces as well. And if you have any questions, Scott and I are available tomorrow and the upcoming days. So just shoot us an email and let's start the conversations. And we're really excited to kick this off. So we haven't done grants for 2 years now because of the pandemic. So we're excited to get back in it and see what you guys come up with. Hopefully you have lots of creativity bundled up over these past years and you've got great ideas. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening and get some good sleep and eat some good dinner now. And we'll talk to you all soon. We'll be in communication. Bye, everybody.